Good morning, everyone. My name is Patty Hubbard, and I am the Outdoor Recreation Grant Planner at Missouri State Parks. And this is the 2024 Grant Application General Information Workshop for the Land and Water Conservation Fund program. So, what is the Land and Water Conservation Fund, or LWCF for short? The LWCF is a grant program that started in 1965 with the passage of the Land and Water Conservation Fund Act. The fund is supported by revenues that is generated by offshore oil and gas drilling leases. The purpose of the act is to assist in preserving, developing, and ensuring that all citizens of the United States, including both present and future generations, have access to outdoor recreation. The act provides funding for federal land acquisition and development, as well as providing financial assistance to states in planning, acquiring, and developing land and water areas and facilities to be used for outdoor recreation. This program is considered a pass-through grant program. The National Park Service is the federal agency who manages the program. The funding is passed through to each state, and here in Missouri, it is granted the Department of Natural Resources. At DNR, we subgrant at least a portion of the funding through a competitive grant program. The amount of funding that is available to each state depends on how much is appropriated by Congress and is allocated by the National Park Service. So the nice thing about the LWCF program is that it supports both big recreation areas like national parks and small outdoor recreations like schools or city parks. This map, even though it is very small and very hard to read, it does show all the projects that we have funded through 2021. You can see the number and distribution of the projects throughout the state and how much the program has benefited both rural and urban areas. In the 57 years that the LWCF has been around, we have funded over $100 million worth of projects across the state. Every single county in Missouri has at least one LWCF projects. We have over 1,700 projects now throughout the state. So, who can apply for LWCF grants? The people who can apply are state and local governments, which means your cities and county municipalities, public school districts, and public universities. Some of you guys might be aware that we also offer the recreational trail program. It's slightly different on who can apply based on the fact that that one is open to more than just public entities, where LWCF is only for public entities. How does the funding work? Well, this is a 50-50 matching grant program, which means of the total project costs, the federal government will pay up to 50%, and your local match must be at least 50%. In other words, for every dollar spent on the project, 50 cents can be reimbursed by the grant, and if the costs are eligible, and you are responsible for covering the remaining costs. The matching share portion of your for your part of the project can be a combination of cash, in-kind labor or equipment use, or donations from a third party. This is a reimbursable program, which means you have to spend some money up front in order to request a reimbursement. The maximum amount that can be requested per sponsor is $50,000 per project. The minimum amount requested is $25,000, and that is just on the federal side. So as you can see, if you match that, you can now have up to $1 million project, and the smallest project is a $50,000 project. At this time, we are not sure what the Missouri apportionment will be for 2024. So we are basing it off of what we got in 2023, which was about $4.9 million. So, what projects are eligible? In the open project selection process, which is that instruction manual, or we like to call it the OPSP for short, if you look in Appendix B, there is the grant application guide. Of that guide, if you look on page 2 through 4, which if you're looking at it as a PDF, it's pages 25 and 27. There's a fairly comprehensive list of the types of eligible projects. They can be categorized in a few ways. First is the acquisition of either land or water for public outdoor recreation. This includes acquiring new parkland for development as a standalone park or new acreage that is adjacent to an existing park that you are expanding. It can also be used to complete multiple purpose projects where one component of the project is outdoor recreation related and the other component is not. A very good example of this is like a water reservoir. Grant funding can be used on the part of the project that is considered outdoor recreation. The second use of LWCF funds is for the development of new facilities and the renovation of existing facilities. So, for example, if you have a park that is 20 to 30 years old and you need to update some of the facilities in the park to meet current accessibility standards, LWCF can help pay for that. If your park received an LWCF grant in the past, it can receive new grant funding to update or renovate the facilities that received that grant funding in the past. LWCF also pays for a combination of acquisition and development or renovation. So, for example, let's say you manage or you own an existing park and you have the opportunity to acquire land adjacent to your existing park and you want to build a playground there, LWCF can help with that. Please be aware all projects that receive LWCF funding must be maintained in public outdoor recreation use in perpetuity. So here are just a few photos of some of the projects that LWCF has funded. The purpose of the slide is to show you the diversity of the projects funded through this program. As you can see, we have a skate park, we have a very large playground, we have a splash park, there's a trail down there at the bottom, and then of course there's a picnic shelter. And as we move on to this page, you'll see that there's the fishing dock, there's the tennis/pickleball courts, we also have campgrounds, and we also help with school tracks that are being used as walking tracks for the public. And then here's another picture, an aerial view of a playground. Here is a list of a few things that are not eligible for funding. More complete lists can be found in the OPSP in that application guide on page 4 or 5 or Adobe page 27 through 28. So what we cannot fund are support facilities that contribute to indoor activities such as meeting rooms, restaurants, luxury cabins, furnishings, food preparation equipment, and kitchens, indoor facilities for public recreation, such as recreation centers and like indoor pools, areas or facilities designed primarily for semi professional or professional arts or athletics, restoration or the preservation of historic buildings. Community gardens that are mainly for commercial enterprises, boating equipment such as buoys, rope, life jackets, and boats, and informational material, brochures, and leaflets. So Before you start filling out this application, I do recommend that you take a look and make sure that your project is eligible to be funded. So one thing I want to show here also with this slide is the fact that community gardens are an eligible expense, but if it's mainly being used for commercial, it's not. Same a facility such as a restroom is eligible, but if it mainly contributes to that indoor recreation, it's not eligible. So that's how that all works. So if you have questions, you can always feel free to ask too. So how do you apply? The process for applying is fairly simple, but if you are starting to feel very overwhelmed as you start filling out the paperwork, please give us a call and we can help you with it. Plus, these workshops are also very helpful. The grants management section information is listed here on the screen. We have our phone numbers and our website. The first step is to go to our website and download the grant application form and the open project selection process or OPSP packet, which, like I said, is the directions for filling out the application. You would then fill out the application form and save it. You need to print it, and then you need to mail us 2 hard copies of it. The forms cannot be emailed to us. The grant application packets must be postmarked or received by November 15th of this year. New this year, we are offering 4 separate workshops that will go through each section of the application. These are not mandatory workshops, but they are there to help you in filling out the application. If you have concerns about your application, for example, if you want someone to review your scope of work to make sure the activities are eligible, feel free to submit a draft copy of your application to us by October 11th. It doesn't have to be the whole packet. It can just be the application or whatever you need us to look at. And we will give you suggestions on how to approve it. So these courtesy reviews that are due by October 11th can be emailed to us. You email it to the msp@dnr.mo.gov email address, and then write in the subject line request for LWCF courtesy review. Now, we can only accept up to 8 megabytes. So if you're sending something that's rather large, you may have to break it up into multiple emails. Just let us know that so that we're looking out for more than just one. After all the applications have been received, the application packets are sent to the LWCF Internal Advisory Board for scoring. This is a board made up of park and recreational professionals. They will look at your application independently and score it based on the criteria listed on the score sheet at the end of the OPSP packet. The grant application guide explains how many points are allocated to each section. After scoring all the applications, the board comes together as a group in January for the norming process, where they discuss the individual merits of the applications. They may adjust their scores accordingly to the strengths or weaknesses identified for another group member that they may have overlooked. At the end of the meeting, they submit a list of projects that are recommended for funding. The grants management section will submit that list to our division director for his preliminary approval. Once we get his approval, we contact the applicants of the projects that have preliminary been selected, and we schedule what we call a pre-award site inspection to verify that everything in your application was as described. At that time, we also conduct our risk assessment, which evaluates your capacity of complying with the requirements of the grant. Us contacting you to do a pre-approval site inspection and risk assessment is your clue that you are moving on to round 2 of the application process. We generally make those phone calls for those pre-awards in late February to early March. So that's usually when you find out if you've made it into the next round. If you do not get a phone call, it does not mean that you're out. It just means that you weren't preliminarily selected. And it's once we complete those pre-approval site inspection and risk assessments, we put together a list of projects that we recommend for funding to send to our division and department for approval. After we have that approval, we will send the draft applications to the National Park Service, and generally those get submitted in mid-April. All applicants will be notified the results of the application review process, usually by the end of June. Projects that are approved by the National Park Service will be uploaded into grants.gov when MPS opens a grant round, which is usually there's one in July and there's also one in December. So, basing off the past 2 years, the notice of award and project agreements will be sent to applicants probably in January to September of 2025. And that's after we receive the federal award from the National Park Service. At the time, applicants of projects that have been awarded by the National Park Service will be invited to attend a mandatory grant administrative workshop. This is where we discuss the oversight and management of the project, as well as the long-term stewardship requirements. Applicants will then have 2 years to complete the project once it is awarded. So as you can tell, this is a very long process. As you're thinking at doing your budgets right now, think of you're probably not going to get awards until January to September 2025. This is also in your OPSP. There is a timeline on like page 2 or 3 of the OPSP so that you have that there for reference. One thing that is important to remember is that you can't start any type of development activities such as clearing the area of trees, removing the old equipment, grading the site in preparation for this project, or acquire the property until you have a signed agreement with DNR and we have given you notice to proceed. So, doing any type of clearing, demo, or grading ahead of time of the award will negate the environmental review process that the National Park Service must complete. And if you start that and we find out, then the project is not eligible for funding. So, generally, any cost incurred before a financial assistance agreement has been signed are not eligible. So, example, the cost of filling out this application, if you're paying someone to help you write it, those are not eligible costs. The only exception to the rule are the pre-award costs, which can represent up to 10% of the total budget. These planning costs are for things that are in design and in the environmental review process. So if you hire someone to help you with the environmental section, that can be a pre-award cost. If you already have a design firm designing the project, that can be a pre-award cost. All pre-award planning costs have to be very detailed in your application in order to claim them as a reimbursable expense. So you want to make sure that you are listing these things in your budget. There is one specific question that asks about pre-award, and you need to list that all in there as pre-award. And only design and environmental review can be pre-award costs. Everything else has to happen after a grant is received from the National Park Service. Some other specific regulations that you want to think about when you are planning your scope of work and your budget. The first one is the Americans with Disability Act, or ADA. You will need to make sure that you have accessible parking and routes within the park that connect everything that will be receiving federal funds. So if you have a playground and you do not have an accessible route, that accessible route and accessible parking can now be part of your has to be part of your scope of work and can be part of your budget. Okay. Another thing I really want you to consider is the Build America, Buy America, which we're going to discuss here in the next couple of slides. And then also we have the Uniform Relocation Assistance and Real Property Acquisition Policies and Act that must be followed. And we're going to discuss that act more on Tuesday afternoon during the Real Property Acquisition Workshop. So, the Build America, Buy America is a new requirement that the National Park Service has added to all of its federal awards. And it's as required by Section 7914 of the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, also known as the Infrastructure Investment and Job Act. It's Public Law 117-58. On or after May 14th of 2022, none of the funds under a federal award that are part of a federal financial assistance program for infrastructure may be obligated for a project unless all the iron and steel products, including the coatings, are made in America. All manufactured products used in the project are produced in America, and construction materials used in the projects are produced in the United States unless they are subject to an approved waiver. The only excluded items are cement, aggregate, and aggregate binding agents. So your rock, your concrete, and your asphalt are exempt. The National Park Service is taking the broadest definition for infrastructure and has stated that all LWCF projects fall under this new law. So when you are looking at getting estimates for your projects, please make sure that you are asking about Build America, Buy America provision. Um, and it's very important that you understand that this is different than Buy American and but the Buy American law. So this is the Build America, Buy America. As you can see, what it's including: splash pads, playgrounds, all materials to build a shelter, your lumber, your drywall, your plastics are now all encompassed with this. So very important that when you're getting estimates, that you are getting estimates for materials that meet the Build America, Buy America requirements. Now, the National Park Service does have two general waivers that your project will fall under or could fall under. The first one is the small grant waiver. This is a general waiver that provides approval to waive the Buy America preference for federal awards when the total project cost is under $250,000. So if your total project cost falls under that 250,000, then your project does not need to meet the Buy America requirements. So um, if you, and I'm going to tell you one issue we're having is with splash pads. So if you are thinking about doing a splash pad, I recommend that that be the only thing you do for your project and try and keep that cost below $250,000 so you don't have to meet that requirement. And so, it really helps if you have a smaller project, then you can fall underneath that waiver. The other waiver that the National Park Service has is the de minimis waiver. And this states that um, it approves to waive the Buy America, Build America provision for otherwise covered infrastructure projects when the purchase is totaling up to 5% of the total project cost. Um, so if you have a project that's 500,000, then the de minimis for your project is 40,000. So you could claim up to $40,000 as that did not meet that requirement. So that's helpful when you have a playground, but maybe in that playground there's like one piece of equipment or maybe a base of a piece of equipment that do not meet the Build America, Buy America, then those and they fall under that 5%, then you could still have that playground and stuff. So it's just very important that you guys remember when you're out asking for bids that you're finding project materials that meet this requirement. And on our website, there is a Build America, Buy America certification that if you want to print that off and kind of read more about it, and this is something that would happen if you would receive awards, you'd be required to have this filled out by your contractors so that when you're asking them, they will understand what you're asking for. So, hopefully you guys have had the chance to download the application and the OPSP, which is the directions. If not, you can download the forms from the Land and Water Conservation Fund website. I've circled the links here. There are also links in the notepad to the website. We do recommend that you use Adobe for downloading and for completing the application. We get contacted every year with people saying they can't fill it out. It's not saving when they're using a different program. So use Adobe. The free version of Adobe works for filling this application out. I recommend you download it to your computer and then you'll be able to fill it out. And then when you're ready, you can actually digitally have your person digitally sign it, and then you need to print it off and you're going to send it in to us. Please make sure that you have the 2024 application because there are some differences from the 23 application. Make sure that you start working on the environmental review process early because, as you know, some of those processes take up to 30 days, and you have to have a complete application to us. It has to be postmarked or to us by November 15th of 2023. And if you look over in the related content on here, you will notice there is the Build America, Buy America certification. It's the third from the bottom, and you can click on that if you want to learn more about that as you're filling out your application. So, as I said, this year we're doing things a little bit different. I'm going to be hosting a series of 4 workshops that's basically going to break the application down by section. Each workshop should last between an hour to an hour and a half. You can decide which workshops to attend, um, or if you want to attend them all. And then I'm going to post a copy of the workshops, um, hopefully online by September 8th. The first workshop will be tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. We'll cover the following questions of the application. So this is basically our project development and scope of it's the scope of work and budget workshop. Um, it's going to cover questions 49 through 59. Then we'll also cover 60 and 61, which are project need. Then we'll do the partnership question, which is 67. And then the budget and budget detail, which is 68 through 75. Tomorrow afternoon at 2 o'clock will be the workshop for acquisition of real property. This workshop is for anyone that will be acquiring land by purchase or donation. We will be covering questions 35 through 53 of the application, and we will be discussing the Uniform Act. On Wednesday at 9 a.m. will be the workshop for project development and LWCF boundary map. So this workshop will cover project location, which is questions 12 through 28, project management and stewardship questions, which is 29 through 33, and project planning questions 60 through 66. There will also be examples of LWCF boundary maps at that one. Our last workshop will be Thursday afternoon at 2, and it's going to cover the environmental review section of the application. This workshop will cover questions 76 through 85, and I'll show you the maps and the reports needed to complete this section. You can register all these workshops from the LWCF website or from the link here at the bottom of the page. But what I do want to cover is a couple things in the application because these are the general information. So this is the first page, and we're going to cover the last page of the application. So the first section of the application, which is question 1 through 8, asks you to provide general information about the party who is applying for the application. The first two questions ask you to provide information about your organization. Note that we want a mailing address. So if it's a P.O. box, it's a P.O. box. This should be filled out based off the entity who's applying for the funds. Note that we are no longer accepting the DUNS number, and you need to provide your 12-character alphanumeric ID from sam.gov called your Unique Entity Identifier, or UEI. If you do not have a UEI, you need to go to sam.gov and register with them, and then they will send you one. This can take a little bit to get your UEI, so you might want to do that now. Question 3, ask about the application preparer. This is the person who is writing the application for you. It doesn't have to be the same. It doesn't have to be a person from your agency. So if you're using a regional planning commission, that would be them who would fill this out. The next question, question 4, asks for the project manager, and this is the person who is going to help manage the project. They're also might be the person who's going to do the reimbursements for the organization. This is also the person that, if you do get recommended for funding, they will be the one who attends the mandatory grant administrative workshop. Question 5 through 8 asks you your federal and state representative and regional planning commission. Question 5 asks for the U.S. House of Representative member. Question 6 asks for the Missouri House of Representative member, and 7 asks for your Missouri State member. Note that we are not asking for the U.S. Senator, and that's because everyone has the same 2 U.S. Senators in Missouri. And these are the people that we generally will contact when you guys do get an award, to let them know that someone in their district received an award. And then it asks if you have a regional planning council, which council you're in. Question 9 through 11 asks you to provide information about your organization's background and prior performance with the Department of Natural Resource. This section is the first section that gets points. It's worth 10 points. Pursuant to 2 CFR 200, we are required to conduct a risk assessment of all applicants to ensure that we are being good stewardship of taxpayer dollars, and that we are only awarding grants to entities that have the capacity to manage the projects. The answers given in this section provide some information about your organization. If you are selected to move into round 2, you will be asked to provide more information to help us complete the risk assessment, such as copies of your most recent audit, accounting policies, and procedures. Make sure to answer these questions based off the organization listed in question 1. So, for example, if the City of Missouriville Park and Recreation Department is the applicant, the information in this section should reflect the department and not the city as a whole, or vice versa. If it's the city that's applying, then this would all be about the city. In question 11, please notice that we are asking you to provide performance history information for grants received by DNR as a whole and not just the LWCF program. Only talk about grants from the past 10 years. Make sure to provide accurate information so that we can verify with the other grant managers. So what we're looking for is not just LWCF, but like if you've had scrap tire, maybe you had a historic preservation grant. This all helps us with our risk assessment and stuff. So, and then if you've had open grants, if you have a current open grant, you need to mark that and then answer the questions down below. But like I said, base it off past 10 years only. So only back to 2013. Now for the last page of the application, we have our supporting document checklist. The supporting document checklist is provided on the application as an aid to the project sponsors and should be completed before submitting the application packet. The supporting documents are required documentation to support your application and must be included in your application packet. For a detailed summary of each of these required items on the checklist, go to the OPSP Appendix B, the Grant Application Guide. Go to page 9 through 11 or Adobe pages 32 through 34. When you are reading the OPSP or that Grant Application Guide, you will notice that some of the words are highlighted in purple. That indicates to you that a supporting document is needed for this question. And I did that this year just to kind of help you guys as you're reading through that application guide to help really notice which questions are really needing supporting material. In order for your application to be considered complete, you must provide all the information listed in this checklist unless it says if applicable, and in which case you get to determine if it applies to you. So, for example, the school/community agreement is a requirement for schools that are applying, but does not apply to a city or a county. So, you would not have to do it, but the school would. The directions are also include template language for many of the items in this checklist, such as letters to send to U.S. Fish and Wildlife, the resolution, the financial assurance letters all have templates. And then the Missouri State E-Verify is included on page 13 through 16 or Adobe page 36 through 39. You will need to fill this out and return it with your application packet. Remember that incomplete or handwritten applications will not be scored. The certification of responsible person is the signature section. A responsible official of the sponsoring agency, which is the individual that is named in the resolution, must sign and date this section to complete the application, or the application cannot be scored. So if we get an unsigned application, unfortunately, it will not be able to be scored. Examples of responsible officials include mayors, city managers or administrator, park and recreation department directors, and chief financial officers. The responsible official does not need to be the contact person listed on the application, but does need to read the application and understand the requirements of administering the grant should one be awarded. And like I said, this should also be the person that is listed in the resolution who is able to sign for the application. The responsible official cannot be an independent grant writer who is not affiliated with the agency. So it has to be someone within your agency that is named in the resolution. An incomplete or inaccurate application packet will not be eligible for scoring. You must have these applications to us by November 15th of 2023. So this is the end of our presentation. I have put up here my contact information. My name is Patty Hubbard. Most of you may know or are wondering, I did have a name change. It used to be Reed. It's now Hubbard. I recently got married. So new email for me, and some phone number still the same. And then Lindsay Latham is our section chief here at Missouri State Parks. And if I am not available, he is definitely available to answer any questions that you have. Feel free to shoot emails to that mspgrants@dnr.mo if you have any questions. We're here for you.